All right, AEW this week took place from the UBS Arena in Long Island, New York, and it was a great show. But before we get to that, I do want to talk a little bit about some news that's making headlines in the world of professional wrestling as it pertains to AEW. And I want to talk about Johnny Gargano and Kyle O'Reilly because both were seemingly written off NXT television on Tuesday night. And it's said that both of their contracts expired earlier this month. And Johnny Gargano at least signed an extension to go on past War Games and the Tuesday after War Games as well. So there's conflicting reports on whether or not they're leaving. Different websites with different sources backstage have said some people are expecting them to leave. Some people are expecting them to stay. Some people noted that both are expecting to have children in early 2022. Candice LeRae, of course, is pregnant. Evidently, Kyle O'Reilly's partner is as well. So it's not really clear if they are leaving WWE. It definitely seemed that way based on how they were portrayed on television recently, but it could just be that they're going away for a while, and after their kids are born, they'll come back to WWE. That's possible. But it's also possible that they could end up in AEW. With Kyle O'Reilly, you could then pair him back up with Bobby Fish. Before going to NXT, Fish and O'Reilly were known as Red Dragon. They won Tag Team Gold in Ring of Honor. They won Tag Team Gold in New Japan Pro Wrestling. They've had a lot of feuds, a lot of matches with the Young Bucks and others who are in AEW now. Certainly, they would add something to the tag team division. Of course, the division already has a lot of depth and talent, but Fish and O'Reilly would be right there at the very top of the list if they were to reunite in AEW. Also, if O'Reilly ends up in AEW, then you've got the three original members of Undisputed Era in AEW too, which is interesting considering they were the top heel group in NXT when there was the AEW NXT war on Wednesday nights. Roderick Strong, according to a report from Sean Ross Sapp, Roderick Strong re-signed with WWE earlier this year, so his contract isn't expected to be up anytime soon, although he could still just be one of the many WWE releases that might be made in the future. And then you'd have 4 Undisputed Era members ending up in AEW. I don't think they would. I don't think AEW would turn down the opportunity to bring in Roderick Strong. Johnny Gargano, obviously, Johnny Gargano's matches on TakeOver are right up there with some of the best we've seen in the modern era. He could definitely be on his way to AEW. It was said that WWE really wanted to keep Johnny Gargano. However, he's not really what they're looking for in a wrestler right now. They're looking for big guys right now. Those are who they're pushing. They're not pushing the smaller, good worker type wrestlers that Johnny Gargano fits the mold of. So we'll see. It's possible. Basically, anything is at play with Gargano and O'Reilly right now. There are reports that their contracts are completely up, completely finished as of December 10th, so as of tomorrow. So they could show up at Winter is Coming next week for AEW, or we could not see them for months, and they could end up right back in WWE. Anything's possible with Gargano and O'Reilly. Any of the reports that are out there are fairly inconclusive. It's just reporters talking to talent backstage, asking them what they think is going to happen. Well, the talent backstage doesn't know what's going to happen. Really, only O'Reilly and Gargano know what's going to happen. So that's all we can take from this. Another bit of news actually just broke as I'm recording this. And that's WWE has released Jeff Hardy. And that, I mean, I don't know what's going on with Jeff Hardy. There was this thing at a house show. Was it over the weekend? Yes, it was over the weekend. Where Hardy, I guess, had an off night and left through the crowd. He tagged out and then left through the crowd. And then he was sent home. And now today, WWE has announced that they've released him. So who knows what, like, with Jeff Hardy, your mind kind of always goes to, well, he had that incident in TNA where he showed up in no condition to perform. There's been issues of driving under the influence. And so you worry that what happened over the weekend was another incident similar to what happened at, I think it was Victory Road or some TNA pay-per-view where he was in no condition to perform. They just did a quick match with Sting. And so you hope it's not that. You hope it's that he was just ticked off at WWE and the people backstage for whatever reason and decided to leave through the crowd during a house show. If it's that, then okay, great. But if it's, if he's having substance abuse issues again, you want him to get help and stuff like that. And you want him to get help before he ends up in another promotion. But assuming everything's all good with Jeff Hardy personally, and that he's not dealing with quote unquote demons at the moment, Jeff Hardy coming into AEW would provide the opportunity to reunite one of the greatest tag teams in the history of professional wrestling, Matt and Jeff Hardy, the Hardy Boys. And you could have both of those guys kind of finishing off their careers in a place that's going to respect them a little bit more and a place that's going to give them matches against the Young Bucks. You could have the Hardy Boys versus the Young Bucks. That hasn't happened since that one match in Ring of Honor they had. I don't even know when that was. Was that like 2016? That was a long time ago. But the Hardy Boys, I don't think that you can drop the opportunity to reunite the Hardy Boys if you're Tony Khan. And so we'll see what happens with that, because Jeff Hardy is now a free agent. He can go anywhere, and provided he doesn't need help at the moment, the possibility is wide open that Jeff Hardy could end up in AEW. The other bit of news that I wanted to talk about before we get into AEW Dynamite this week is ticket sales from the UBS Arena in Long Island. So this is interesting because AEW had announced this show at UBS Arena. It's a brand new building in Long Island. AEW announced that they wanted to go there. WWE then ran a show there a couple of weeks ago, but they added it to their schedule after AEW did. And I think the idea was, well, WWE figured that they were going to outdraw AEW, sell more tickets. And that's not what happened. AEW sold more tickets than WWE did. So just looking at, there's a Twitter account called Wrestle Tickets. And they provide updates on, ticket sales at various arenas. It's a really good source if you're interested in, how the promotions are selling tickets, who's selling more, WWE, AEW. At WrestleTix, very good account to follow. So, in the UBS Arena for the Monday, November 29th episode of WWE Raw, there were 5,887 tickets either sold or distributed. That's for Raw. Now, last night as I'm recording this, from the UBS Arena AEW Dynamite show, sold or distributed 9,583 tickets. So AEW outsells WWE in Long Island. And Tony Khan is feeling pretty good about that. He was interviewed by News 12 recently, and this is a quote that he said about the competition between AEW and WWE. Specifically, he mentions this show in the UBS Arena in Long Island. Tony Khan said, "I just came to run a show on Long Island, and it's like, hey, they jump in front of the line, run a show ahead of me, try to beat me in a market. Well, how did that work out?" So that looks pretty good for WWE, for AEW, that you're selling, thousands of tickets more to an event in a brand new arena than WWE does. That's pretty good. That's pretty good for AEW. All right, so let's get to this AEW Dynamite show, the one that outdrew WWE Raw in the UBS Arena in Long Island. And of course, we are going into Maxwell Jacob Friedman's hometown. So MJF had really been playing it up that he's going to receive this amazing hometown reaction from the fans. And that's exactly what he got, but it didn't happen right away. So as soon as the show goes on the air, MJF's music hits. You hear this big ovation from the crowd. And I was a little surprised. I was like a tiny bit surprised that the reaction was so positive for MJF. Not for any other reason other than, like, of course they're proud of MJF. I mean, MJF is so good at what he does, right? So, of course, the fans in Long Island are going to be proud of the fact that he came out of Long Island. But I thought that a lot of them would still want to boo him. Not because they actually don't like him, but because he's such a heel. He'll never, well, I don't know about never, but he is such a heel right now that booing him is almost like cheering him. You know, it's showing appreciation for what he does. Booing is showing appreciation for what MJF does. But that's not what happened here. The Long Island fans just loved him so much, they wanted this to be the place where MJF gets a positive reaction. Everywhere else in the world, MJF is going to be booed out of the building. But Long Islanders want to make it that when MJF comes home, this is the place that he gets cheered. And that's exactly what happened. And CM Punk decided to troll the crap out of it. And I thought it was awesome. So MJF's music hits and CM Punk comes out and the crowd just boos him like crazy. And I thought, what a roller coaster of a ride CM Punk has gone on in terms of fan reaction since coming back to wrestling. Because he comes back and they sell all these tickets to the United Center in Chicago. This pay-per-view goes through the roof, does the best numbers that AEW's ever done. So people are clearly getting behind CM Punk, or they're excited to see CM Punk back. They go to all these markets and he gets this hero's welcome and he just talks to the fans and has this love fest. Numerous different shows these love fests took place on. And of course in Chicago, he's a frickin' god. There's no rowdier crowd in wrestling than a Chicago crowd when they're cheering on CM Punk. But on a couple of occasions now, CM Punk has found himself on the wrong end of some booing. When he faced Eddie Kingston at Full Gear, the fans were more behind Eddie Kingston than they were for CM Punk. And now, going into Long Island, MJF's hometown, these fans booed CM Punk. And you could hear CM Punk chants. There were definitely people trying to cheer CM Punk. It wasn't a 100% pro MJF crowd. There were some CM Punk fans there, but the MJF crowd was louder. And there was probably more of them. And then Punk just played right into it. Punk played right into it without really breaking character, because he came in and he ripped on the New York Islanders for not having won a game in the UBS Arena yet. And, you know, that's fitting with Punk, because if Punk's mad at a city, he'll take shots at their hockey team. That's just kind of how he does things. He's a big hockey fan. He talked about how the New York Islanders beat the Ottawa Senators the other night, and that was the equivalent of him beating QT Marshall. And I thought that works. That works. You know, the Ottawa Senators are the equivalent of a QT Marshall. You know, they'll get wins on dark, but not really on the big show. And I thought it was interesting because he wouldn't turn heel on like the whole AEW audience. That wouldn't make sense. But he'd rip on Long Island fans, and he ripped on MJF, basically saying, that's your guy that's too afraid to fight. Every time I go to fight him, he runs away. That's your guy. And he compared it to when Dennis Rodman left the Detroit Pistons and signed with the Chicago Bulls. And Punk talked about how he hated Dennis Rodman when he was on the Detroit Pistons, because that was our enemy. You know, that was our big rival. But then when he was on the Chicago Bulls, I was the biggest Dennis Rodman fan. And that's what he said MJF is. He's Long Island's Dennis Rodman. He's Long Island's The Worm, which is Dennis Rodman's nickname. And he said he didn't blame the Long Island fans for cheering MJF, but he did feel a little bit sorry for them because their guy keeps running away and stuff like that. And so this is going on and going on, and MJF's not coming out. MJF's not coming out to confront Punk because MJF has a big match coming up. He's going to be in the Dynamite Diamond Battle Royal. He's defending his diamond ring. That's a big deal for MJF. So he's not going to possibly get into it with CM Punk when he's got that match to prepare for. That was like the headcanon. It was like, okay, that's why he's not coming out. Because I imagine that would be the real reason that MJF's character would have for not coming out and confronting Punk when he's running down his hometown fans, right? So Punk just said, he has some other big lines there where he says his dog Larry has more balls than MJF and he's neutered. And then that's the end of, or Punk's promo ends and he just goes to the back. And then we get MJF actually coming out. But before he does, this video played that really served to get the fans behind MJF. So AEW was leaning right into it. They wanted him to get this hometown reaction. Whereas other companies kind of go the opposite way with it. They want like a uniform reaction in each city. So they'll have like a bad guy who's from the hometown say something to get booed by his hometown fans. AEW was not going that route. They wanted MJF to get the hometown reaction that he did. So they play this video talking about his high school football accomplishments, his wrestling accomplishments, being in that a cappella group, the Acafellas. Anything that they could do to show that MJF came out of Long Island and has been a big success. So he comes out and he gets a hero's ovation. And he goes into the Dynamite Diamond Battle Royal in front of his hometown fans, but he keeps the same character. He never changes who he is. He embraces the crowd's reaction. You know, he slapped hands with people who were cheering him and things like that, but he never changed how he does things. Because he wrestled that Battle Royal like a dastardly, cowardly heel the entire time. Even up to the post-match angle, he never broke away from being that dastardly, cowardly heel, even though he was in front of his hometown fans, and even though AEW wanted him to get cheered. Because it wouldn't make sense that he comes in front of his hometown fans and is all of a sudden brave, is all of a sudden sticking up for the baby faces who are getting beaten up. That wouldn't make sense. That would be such a huge move away from the character that he's presented. So all this is, hey, the Maxwell Jacob Friedman character, he's going to be the same guy, but if people are going to cheer him, he's going to embrace that. But he's not going to change how he operates in the ring or just how he operates around wrestling. He's not going to confront CM Punk. He's not going to help the downtrodden baby faces. So he wrestles this match where he basically just hides behind Wardlow for the vast majority of the match. And anytime somebody would try and throw him out, that person would get booed. Even though MJF was wrestling like such a cowardly heel. And then finally Wardlow, I forget who it was. Two people are trying to eliminate Wardlow. So MJF just comes behind and eliminates all three of them. So Wardlow's out of the picture as well. And so finally we get down to the final three. It's Dante Martin, Ricky Starks, and Maxwell Jacob Friedman. And Dante Martin, out of nowhere, attacks his Team Taz teammate and throws Ricky Starks over the ropes. And we find out, and it's definitely revealed by Taz on commentary, that Dante Martin joining Team Taz was all just a big swerve. It was just a big swerve, I guess, to get to this position right here, where Dante would be in the Battle Royal with another member of Team Taz, and then he could double cross the Team Taz member, which is exactly what he did. So then at the end, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, he shakes hands with Dante Martin. He goes to leave. Ricky Starks comes up behind Martin, starts beating him up. And then MJF's kind of like, he's a little torn. He's like, should I go? He's kind of motioning to the fans like, should I go back in there? Do you guys want me to go back in there? And then he's like, nah, forget it. I'm not going back in there. That's not my move. And then he kind of turns around like, I don't know. Maybe I should go back in there. Maybe I should. And then finally, he just runs full speed down the entranceway, and he's ready. He's gonna do it. He's gonna do the good thing. He's gonna be a baby face, and he gets up in Ricky Starks' face. But then I guess he just decides, well, I'm gonna be facing Dante Martin next week. Might as well soften him up. So MJF just starts beating down Dante Martin along with Ricky Starks, and the fans, hey, whatever MJF does, they're gonna follow him. If he's gonna beat up his opponent for the Dynamite Diamond battle, or the Dynamite Diamond ring that's going to be up for grabs next week at Winter is Coming, then they're going to cheer for him. But then CM Punk comes out to make the save for Dante Martin. The fans boo him. MJF gets out of dodge, as he always does when CM Punk looks like he's going to get physical with him. CM Punk then gives the go to sleep to Ricky Starks and stands there with Dante Martin. And that's the end of that segment. So the first half hour of the show, it's all based around the CM Punk MJF feud, and it was phenomenal. It was like everything that happened here was interesting and engaging. Another thing to bring up is that CM Punk mentioned in his promo that he's keeping an eye on the world title match that's going to take place next week, and he assumes that MJF is as well. Now, to me, that signifies that when CM Punk and MJF wrestle, the winner is likely going to go on and challenge for the world championship. So that adds another sort of interesting element to this feud between MJF and CM Punk. And so I wonder when we're going to get that match between MJF and CM Punk now. It could be on the New Year's Smash show. It could be, I guess it won't be at Battle for the Belts because there's no belts on the line. But that's a big match that's not going to be on pay-per-view. It's going to be on regular television, CM Punk versus Maxwell Jacob Friedman. That should be something that pulls a big number for AEW. But we don't yet know when that match is going to take place. All right, next up, we had 8-man tag team action featuring Jurassic Express, Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus teaming up with the Varsity Blondes to go up against the Acclaimed and 2.0. So this match concluded when Jungle Boy put Max Caster into the snare trap, made him tap, and it's another win for Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus. The angle that's been building up here is that Christian Cage is playing a mentorship role of sorts with Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy, and he wants to lead them to tag team gold. So it seems like Jurassic Express is next in line for a title shot. Whoever comes away from the match on Rampage between FTR and the Lucha Bros as tag team champions, they're going to take on Jurassic Express, and we'll see where this storyline goes with Christian kind of playing this mentorship role for them. But then after the match, Eddie Kingston was out. Eddie Kingston came out because Daniel Garcia tried to interfere in the match. So Eddie Kingston comes out, he pulls down Daniel Garcia, and then he takes a camera back with him to the back where Ortiz from the Inner Circle is there as well. And he gets into this big brawl, him and Ortiz with Garcia and 2.0. 2.0 and Garcia, of course, they had the 3-on-2 advantage. They leave Kingston and Ortiz laying. Thought that was interesting. Not really sure where they're going with the Kingston and Ortiz being aligned. Of course, Ortiz is in the Inner Circle with Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho and Eddie Kingston kind of were on the same side going up against Garcia and 2.0. So there could be something there. Could be Kingston. It's just Kingston has a history with Santana and Ortiz. So we could possibly see those three align. And maybe just Santana and Ortiz aren't as aligned with the Inner Circle as they used to be. So we could see something there. But there's definitely an angle building with Eddie Kingston and Ortiz. Otherwise, why was Ortiz there? So we'll see what happens with that. Then after that, we go to a backstage interview with FTR and Tully Blanchard. And this basically just announced that the title match, which was supposed to happen last week on Rampage, however, Phoenix had some travel problems, couldn't get in to wrestle that match, so he was replaced by Pac. We are finally going to get the title match between FTR and the Lucha Bros this Friday on Rampage. And so Tully Blanchard and FTR, they just talked about how The Wrong Man had been pinned the last time they met at Full Gear. And then in Mexico for AAA, FTR defended successfully the AAA Tag Team Championships against the Lucha Bros. So basically saying like, all right, well, we're the favorites here. We've beaten you multiple times. You have to pin the Wrong Man in order to get a victory over us. Then after that, we stayed in the tag team division as the Young Bucks took on Chuck Taylor and Rocky Romero from Best Friends / Chaos. I think the idea that Rocky Romero said is that all members of the Best Friends are sort of in chaos now. They're in the Chaos faction from New Japan Pro Wrestling, which makes sense because Chuck Taylor and Trent, when they were in New Japan Pro Wrestling, they were in Chaos. And Rocky Romero and Trent used to be the Roppongi Vice tag team, and they were in Chaos as well. So it just makes sense. So you're really just adding Orange Cassidy, Chris Statlander, and Wheeler Utah to Chaos. Anyway, these guys had a great tag team match filled with a lot of near falls that I bought. There was right up until the finish, there was 2 very believable near falls where it looked like the Best Friends were going to get the victory. The Young Bucks, however, then turn it into the Meltzer driver. They get the win. But the real stuff happened after the match. So then we get to after the match. And this was when some really fantastic stuff happened. So the Super Clique is beating down the Best Friends. And it's like, okay, well, Wheeler Yuta comes out, tries to make the save. But then Wheeler Yuta gets beaten down too. So it's like, all right, well, we're out of Best Friends. We're out of Best Friends, right? So who could come and possibly save them? And we hear the Best Friends music. And then we see Sue's minivan drive into the arena in what has to be one of the greatest entrances I've ever seen in professional wrestling when Sue drops off her son at wrestling. Just like she was dropping him off at swimming lessons, she pulls the minivan up, he gets out, gives her a kiss on the cheek, and then goes to meet up with his friends for wrestling. I loved everything about this, and then he comes in. I don't even remember what happened after that exactly. I was just so immersed in how much I love that Trent gets dropped off at wrestling by his mom as an entrance. I think they've only done that 1 or 2, maybe 2 times before. But anyway, it's just fantastic. So Trent's back. That's great. Obviously, he's been gone for basically all of 2021. So having him back now is great, and it adds another element now to this Super Clique versus the Best Friends feud. Also, they played the Roppongi Vice theme music, which I thought was pretty interesting because that was Trent and Rocky Romero's tag team in New Japan Pro Wrestling. For a long time, they were Roppongi Vice. So great stuff for the Best Friends. Even better stuff for Sue, Trent's mom, getting back into wrestling. We'll see how her Pro Wrestling Tees shirts sell after this. And so that's interesting because then we could get Trent, Chuck Taylor, and Orange Cassidy all going up against Adam Cole and the Young Bucks. That's a big match that they could put on, well, I guess it won't be on Winter is Coming because they would have announced it by now. But they could put that on, who knows, some big show. That could be the main event of a Dynamite. That's a big match right there. So then in the back, Ruby Soho was being interviewed. The Bunny and Penelope Ford came out. And they said, oh, you know, we're going to team with Nyla Rose to take on you. And, oh, who knows? Because you don't have any friends. And they called her Ruby Solo, which they both got a really big kick about. You know, that's a funny line right there, Ruby Solo. But then anyways, Nyla Rose comes out of nowhere. She attacks Ruby Soho. The three are beaten down on Soho when Ty Conti and Anna Jay came out and rescued her. So it was later made official that will be a match on next week's... Is that next week's Rampage? I think that's next week's... No, that's just at... no, that's on Rampage this week. So on Rampage, we'll see Ruby Soho, team up with Ty J to take on Nyla Rose, Penelope Ford, and the Bunny. So they built up that match. Then we had some really interesting stuff because Sammy Guevara is about to be interviewed. He's on stage. He's got his TNT championship there, and he's been having this open challenge where he took on Jay Lethal, Tony Nese, some other wrestlers. And so as he's being interviewed, Cody Rhodes comes out to thunderous boos. This was not Atlanta where half the crowd is behind him. This was like Chicago where everyone was against him, but it seemed worse. It seemed like they were really like even more negative on Cody than Chicago was. Long Island, no love for Cody Rhodes. Cody comes out and you can see burns that he's got on his arms, and he kind of laughs off all the booing and tells Sammy Guevara that, we're going to wrestle for this TNT championship. And that match was made later for one of the shows that I think it's the one of the holiday shows they have coming up at the end of the month. And Cody did a lot of teasing a heel turn here. He did something that he actually did off air a few weeks ago where he faked like he was going to go through the heel tunnel. Like the bad guys always go through the tunnel that's on the left of the stage, or stage left, I guess. And so Cody acted like he was going to go through that tunnel, like he's a bad guy, like he's going to give in to the fans who really want to see him turn. But he didn't. He went through the good guy tunnel instead. And I thought that was notable because there is this big question about whether or not Cody Rhodes is going to turn heel. He has said in storyline, like on camera and behind the scenes. So he said in a promo on Dynamite that going bad guy, being a heel, that would be the easy way out. I'm not going to do that. So in storyline, he said it. He's also said it outside of storyline, where he said he just does too much charity work for a bad guy run to make sense. But then, if that's the case, if AEW is going to continue with Cody Rhodes as a babyface, they have to put up with him getting the John Cena reaction every time he comes out there. And I don't even know if it's a John Cena type reaction now, because Cena would get cheers. Like you hear, like when Cena would come out, you'd hear like kids and like high pitched voices were cheering for Cena, but then they'd get drowned out by boos. There wasn't too many people cheering for Cody Rhodes on this week's Dynamite. There was in Atlanta, but there wasn't any the week before in Chicago, and there wasn't any this week in Long Island. So, and then Cody Rhodes teasing like he was going to go through the left tunnel. That, I mean, to me, it seems like it's inevitable. Like it seems like it's got to happen. You can't just keep throwing Cody out there to get booed against the narrative like this. It seems like you've got to turn him heel. And even though he doesn't want to do that because of the charity work, Cody is a natural heel. He's far better at being the heel than he is the babyface, and he's a pretty good babyface. But some of the best work that Cody Rhodes ever did was before AEW started, when they did that Bullet Club leadership angle in Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling. That was like the best stuff that he's ever done. Because he is this like Hollywood type guy who like just sort of has a bit of a like Maxwell Jacob Friedman to him. You know, he's got a bit of the Miz to him, where he is kind of naturally hateable for whatever intangible reasons. And so when he leans into that, when he plays into that, he's an excellent bad guy. And I think if he was to turn heel now, he would be the biggest bad guy in the company. And it would also allow him to say, I'm just going to forget about that stipulation where I can't challenge for the world title. I'm going to challenge for the world title. And that would be such a big heel move too. It seems like there are way more possibilities for Cody Rhodes as a bad guy than as a babyface right now. But we'll just have to see if Cody really clamps down and says, I'm not doing that, what happens then? Does he just keep coming out and getting booed? I guess we'll find out. Then after that, Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky, they cut a promo from the crowd and basically said Cody's cutting the line because, he kisses up to Tony Khan and he's an EVP and stuff like that. So it looks like maybe we'll get Scorpio Sky versus Sammy Guevara for that title, or maybe they'll move into an angle with Cody afterwards. They also said that Dan Lambert is going to be coming back soon. Then after that, we get a hype video building up the semifinal match in the TBS title tournament between Thunder Rosa and Jade Cargill. We still don't know when that match is going to take place. We only have 3 matches announced for Winter is Coming, so they'll announce more on Rampage. I would have to imagine that this match is going to take place at Winter is Coming, just because there's been so much hype behind it, and it just makes sense to have it at Winter is Coming. But we'll see. We'll see when they do it. And then staying in the women's division, we had Riho taking on Jamie Hayter. So the idea here is that Jamie Hayter wanted to soften up Riho before Riho challenges Britt Baker for the AEW Women's Championship. And man, Riho looks so fragile in there because she's so small. And Hayter was doing these backbreakers and brain busters and all these moves that just looked like they were destroying Riho. Hayter looked really, really good beating up Riho. And Riho looked like she was just getting the tar kicked out of her. But yeah, and then Riho eventually came back to win the match because obviously she's the good guy. She's challenging for the world title soon. And then after the match, Baker attacked Riho. As my cat jumps off my lap. And so we still don't know when we're going to get Baker versus Riho either. That seems like it could take place at Battle for the Belts, because Battle for the Belts is only 4 weeks away. And they're going to want to do something big for that show. So Baker versus Riho seems like it's pretty big. Obviously, it feels like the match that ultimately is the biggest match they have right now would be Baker versus Thunder Rosa for the title. But we already saw Baker versus Rosa in that Lights Out match, so maybe they're holding off on that, on having that match that's for the title. So maybe we get Baker versus Rosa at Revolution in February, and then Baker versus Riho at Battle for the Belts. That seems like it makes sense that they would do it that way. All right, and then the Varsity Blondes were getting interviewed on the stage, and I remember thinking, I'm a fan of the Varsity Blondes. I was like, all right, they're getting some interview time. Way to go, Brian Pillman, Julia Hart, and Griff Garrison. Good stuff. But then nothing really got, they never really got any talking time. The lights just went out. And when they came back on, there's Malachi Black. And he sprayed the mist kind of into Julia Hart's face. I'm not sure much of that mist actually hit Julia Hart. It feels like Malachi Black is still getting used to the mist. Eventually, after time, he'll start hitting his targets a little bit more. But it feels like he only ever really gets the mist into someone's face if he's 2 inches away from it. Because Julia Hart's crying and acting like she's being burned by this acidic substance that's blinding her. But none of it was really on her face, or hardly anything was on her face. But then Brian Pillman did have a little bit of the mist on his face, and he's just like, oh no, Julia. So, but regardless, we're getting, so I guess we'll get Malachi Black versus either Pillman or Garrison or something along those lines. But Malachi Black has decided that the Varsity Blondes are his latest target. That's pretty interesting. Then we go to our main event. Bryan Danielson, for the 4th week in a row, is taking on a member of the Dark Order in their hometown, John Silver. He's billed from Long Island. I think he's from New York somewhere, but billed from Long Island. And this is after he's beaten Colt Cabana in Chicago. He's beaten Alan Angels just outside of Atlanta. And he beat Evil Uno. Well, not in Evil Uno's hometown, but he still beat Evil Uno. And Bryan Danielson and John Silver come out, and they had an excellent match. It seemed like John Silver got more offense in than any of the other Dark Order members did, but they had a really fantastic match. But it ends when Bryan Danielson gives Silver the Gotch-style pile driver, which I thought was interesting. Gives him the pile driver, locks him in a submission. Silver doesn't tap out, but he's knocked out, so they call for the bell. And then, as has happened in all of the matches that Danielson has had since Full Gear, he cuts a promo afterwards, and he talks about all the Dark Order members that he's beaten up. And then he talks about how he's going to beat up, what he said. He's kicked in the heads of all these Dark Order members. And next week at Winter is Coming, he's going to kick in Hangman Page's head. Hangman Page then comes out and he tries to attack Bryan Danielson. Danielson just gets out of the ring. Page gets on the mic and says, "Next week, I'm going to stomp the cowboy out of you." And that was the last thing to build up before their big Winter is Coming match next week from Texas. And that's going to be a huge match. Bryan Danielson is the best wrestler in the world right now in all categories, in terms of his promos, getting heat, the actual wrestling matches he has, just his presence. Like, so much of this match between Hangman Page and Bryan Danielson has been about just Danielson being a heel. Just Danielson going up against these Dark Order members. It feels like this match has been more about Bryan Danielson than it has been about Hangman Page's first title defense. And like, even on this show, like, Hangman Page was barely on this show at all. He was only in like the last 30 seconds of the show. He said one line and that's it. He hasn't wrestled since Full Gear, whereas Bryan Danielson has wrestled on every show, cut promos on every show. I mean, Hangman Page did commentary and he came out and confronted Danielson, but that's about it. So we did see them like actually get a little bit physical in the ring after the main event this week. So, but next week, the big match, Bryan Danielson versus Hangman Page. I'm really interested to see how that does in the ratings. Like, I think a lot of people will tune in for it. And I don't want to offer any predictions about who will win or things like that, but I would imagine some fans who maybe don't watch AEW all the time and are more familiar with WWE, I think some fans would go into that match thinking that Bryan Danielson's going to win the world title, just by how prominent of a role he's played on television leading up to it. I mean, AEW world champions tend to hold the title for a long time, and Page has only had this title for a month, so I don't know how likely that is, but I do think some people will probably think that Bryan Danielson's going to win the title. And then, as we heard from CM Punk earlier in the night, the first person to get a crack at whoever wins between Danielson and Page will likely be the winner of a yet-to-be-scheduled match between CM Punk and Maxwell Jacob Friedman. So we've got a few matches announced. Now we've got 4 matches actually announced for Rampage on Friday night. That'll be the tag team title match that we didn't get last week between the Lucha Bros and FTR. We'll get Ruby Soho teaming with Ty Conti and Anna Jay going up against Nyla Rose, Penelope Ford, and the Bunny. Adam Cole is going to face Wheeler Yuta as we continue the Super Click versus Best Friends feud. And making his in-ring debut, and a lot of people are going to be very happy about this, Taz's son Hook. Taz's son Hook will make his in-ring debut on Rampage this week. Some people will really like that. Then next week, we've got Winter is Coming from Texas on December 15th. The last time AEW presented Winter is Coming, Kenny Omega defeated Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship. Will we see another title change at this year's event? In the main event, Hangman Page will defend that title against Bryan Danielson. Also on the show for the Dynamite Diamond Ring, MJF will look to retain the ring for another year when he takes on Dante Martin. And also in the rubber match between Serena Deeb and Hikaru Shida, So if you remember, Serena Deeb beat Hikaru Shida just before the TBS title tournament started. That was when Shida was looking to get her 50th win in the division. Serena Deeb picked up the victory over her. Then they met in the first round of the TBS title tournament. Shida avenged her loss, beat Serena Deeb, but then Deeb attacked her after the bell, going after that knee again. And then when Shida was taking on Nyla Rose in the next round of the tournament, Deeb came out of the stands, attacked her, and cost her that match against Nyla Rose. So we see the rubber match between those two, and that will be fantastic. That's also next week at Winter is Coming. And with that, that's our video for this week. Thanks again, everyone, for supporting this video and supporting this channel. Please make sure that you've clicked the like button and the subscribe button and share this video with anyone who you think would enjoy it. I'm Gentleman Ian for Spoiler Free Wrestling.